Thanksgiving at my cousin Derek's house was always loud. Too many people. Too many opinions. Too much fake laughter bouncing off the polished walls of a house that tried very hard to look expensive. I stood at the front door for a second before knocking, adjusting the sleeves of my jacket. It was old, worn at the cuffs. The kind of jacket someone keeps long after fashion moves on. To them, it probably looked cheap. That was intentional. The door swung open and Derek stared at me for half a second before the grin spread across his face. Not the warm kind. The kind people wear when they think they have already judged you. His eyes moved from my boots to the jacket. The laugh came instantly. He called out to the room that the family mystery had finally arrived. Inside, heads turned. Aunt Linda's eyebrows lifted. Uncle Ray smirked. My cousin Melissa whispered something to her husband that made him chuckle. The evaluation was quick and brutal. Outdated jacket. Simple watch. No designer labels anywhere. To them it screamed failure. Derek clapped my shoulder and said he hoped I had not come straight from a thrift store. The room laughed. I smiled politely and stepped inside. The house smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon candles. A long oak table stretched across the dining room, decorated with gold plates and polished glasses. Everything looked perfect. Everything except me. Aunt Linda leaned closer to Melissa and commented that some people never quite figure life out. Uncle Ray said at least I was consistent. More laughter. They assumed the same thing they had assumed for years. That I was the quiet cousin who never quite made it. The one who moved away and disappeared. The one nobody bothered to ask about anymore. I hung my jacket near the door. Derek joked that I should keep it on in case the heating bill was too expensive for me. Another round of laughs. I didn't react, because none of them knew something important. The jacket wasn't cheap. It was custom made in Milan 6 years ago. The watch on my wrist looked simple, but it was one of only 200 ever produced. And the quiet cousin they thought they understood was not the person walking into this room tonight. Dinner hadn't even started yet, and before the night ended, everyone at that table was going to realize just how badly they had misjudged me. I walked further into the house while the laughter slowly faded behind me. No one apologized. No one needed to. In their minds, nothing unusual had happened. This was simply the role I had always played in the family story. The underachiever. The quiet cousin who disappeared after college and never seemed to come back with anything impressive. Derek handed me a drink and told me to make myself comfortable near the fireplace. His tone carried the same polite dismissal people use with strangers they do not plan to talk to again. Across the room, Melissa was showing pictures from her latest vacation in Aspen. Uncle Ray talked loudly about a new investment property he claimed would triple in value. Aunt Linda described a charity event she attended where every plate cost more than most people's monthly rent. They liked to talk about money. They liked even more to show who had it. Every now and then someone glanced at me. Not curiosity, just confirmation. Yes, still the same cousin. Still dressed like that. Still quiet. Derek leaned toward Uncle Ray and whispered something about how some people peak in high school. The comment carried across the room just enough for me to hear it. More chuckles. I sipped the drink slowly and studied the room. The oak dining table was already set. 10 chairs arranged neatly. Name cards placed carefully in front of each plate. I noticed something interesting. There was no card for me. Not an accident. Aunt Linda noticed me looking and waved casually toward a smaller folding table near the kitchen island. She explained that the main table was full this year. Said I would probably be more comfortable over there. The folding table had 3 seats. 2 of them already filled by Derek's teenage nephews who were arguing about video games. The kid table. The message was clear. Across the room, Derek caught my eye and gave a playful shrug as if to say space was limited. I nodded calmly and walked toward the smaller table. Because the truth was something they could not even imagine. I had not come tonight to prove anything. I had come because 2 days ago Derek sent me an email by mistake. An email meant for someone else. Attached to it was a document. A very sensitive document. And sitting quietly at the kid table, I was the only person in this house who knew exactly how much trouble Derek was in. I sat at the folding table while the teenagers beside me argued about which gaming console was better. Neither of them noticed the tension building across the room. At the main table, Derek continued playing the confident host, laughing loudly, refilling drinks, slapping Uncle Ray on the back while telling another story about how his real estate portfolio was expanding faster than expected. The performance was impressive, but performances only work when the audience does not know the script. I pulled out my phone and opened the email again. 2 nights earlier, my inbox had received a message from Derek with the subject line labeled Urgent Review. At first, I assumed it was a mistake meant for someone else with the same name. Then I opened the attachment. A financial projection file. Large numbers. Large promises. But the deeper I looked, the clearer the cracks became. The projections were inflated. The collateral values were exaggerated. And the signatures on the loan application page were not even aligned correctly with the approval stamps. It was not just risky. It was fraudulent. Derek had been applying for a massive private investment loan to expand his properties. Millions of dollars tied to assets that did not actually exist. The kind of mistake that destroys reputations overnight. Across the room, Aunt Linda lifted her glass and began praising Derek for becoming the most successful person in the family. Everyone nodded. Everyone except me. Derek caught my eye again and raised his glass slightly, almost mockingly, as if to toast the quiet cousin at the kid table. If he only knew. The email had another attachment too. A legal draft agreement between Derek and a private equity group based in New York. That was the part that interested me, because the company listed in the document looked very familiar. Not because I had heard about them, because I owned them. Not directly, not publicly, but through a holding structure that most people in that room would never understand. Which meant the investment Derek was desperately chasing was coming from my side of the table. And Derek had absolutely no idea. Dinner was being served when my phone buzzed quietly. A message from my partner in New York. The due diligence report on Derek's deal had just been finalized. 3 words appeared on my screen. Major discrepancies confirmed. I looked up at the oak table where Derek was carving the turkey like a victorious king. He laughed loudly again. Everyone laughed with him. But what none of them understood yet was that before dessert arrived, Derek's entire empire would be hanging by a thread. Dinner began the way it always did. Turkey carved at the center of the oak table. Glasses clinking. Conversations overlapping like a competition for attention. From the folding table near the kitchen, I had a perfect view of everything. Derek stood proudly while explaining his latest expansion plan. 3 new properties under negotiation. Investors lined up. Cash flow projected to triple within 18 months. The confidence in his voice was impressive, almost convincing. Uncle Ray nodded approvingly and said Derek had always known how to play the game. Aunt Linda added that some people simply had a natural instinct for success. Their eyes drifted toward the kid table when she said it. A reminder of who supposedly did not. I kept eating quietly, because my phone had just vibrated again. A message from New York. They want to proceed with the test call. I read the words twice. This was the part Derek would never see coming. My partner's idea was simple. Before finalizing any investment, the firm would conduct one informal verification call with the borrower. A friendly conversation. Just a routine step to confirm numbers. Derek had agreed to it earlier that week. What he did not know was who would be on the other end of that call. Across the room, he was pouring wine while explaining how the new loan would accelerate everything. More properties. Bigger developments. Higher status. He loved that word. Status. The kind that impressed relatives during holidays. My phone buzzed again. The call was scheduled for 20 minutes from now. Perfect timing. Dessert would be arriving soon. I looked around the room again. Melissa laughing at something on her phone. Uncle Ray already planning which new deal Derek might bring him into. Aunt Linda smiling proudly at the golden boy of the family. Then Derek glanced toward me again. He asked loudly if the kid table needed more mashed potatoes. The room laughed once more. I smiled politely and lifted my glass. Because in exactly 20 minutes, the investor Derek had been bragging about all night was going to introduce himself. And when he heard the voice on the other end of that call, Derek was going to realize something terrifying. The quiet cousin at the folding table was the man holding his entire future. The clock above the kitchen stove moved closer to 8. Conversation at the main table grew louder as dessert plates started appearing. Pumpkin pie, pecan pie, whipped cream placed carefully in the center like a final celebration. Derek looked relaxed, confident. The kind of confidence people have when they believe the future is already secured. He stood up to refill his wine and casually mentioned that he might need to step away for a few minutes soon. Said he had an investor call scheduled later that evening. Uncle Ray raised his eyebrows with interest. Even on Thanksgiving, Derek nodded proudly and said big opportunities do not wait for holidays. Aunt Linda smiled as if this only confirmed everything she already believed about him. Across the room, I checked my phone. 3 minutes. My partner had already set up the conference line. Derek would dial in expecting to speak with a junior acquisitions manager. Instead, the system would route the call directly to me. Standard procedure for deals that felt suspicious. The teenagers beside me had finished eating and were already leaving the folding table. Suddenly, I was sitting there alone. A perfect view of the entire dining room. Derek's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced down and smiled. That would be the call invitation. He excused himself casually and stepped toward the living room where the noise was quieter. No one paid much attention, except me. I stood slowly and walked toward the hallway, stopping just far enough away to hear his voice without being seen. He sounded polished the moment he answered. Professional tone, confident rhythm. He thanked the firm for their interest and said he was excited to finalize details. There was a short pause while the system connected. Then the line opened. I stepped a little closer and spoke clearly into my phone. I thanked him for taking the time tonight. For half a second, he continued speaking smoothly. Then my voice registered. His sentence stopped mid-word. The silence stretched. In the dining room behind us, laughter erupted over something Melissa said. But in the hallway, everything had gone still. Derek slowly turned his head. And when his eyes landed on me standing there with the phone in my hand, the color drained from his face. The silence between us felt heavy. Derek stared at the phone in his hand, then at me, then back at the screen as if it might explain something his mind refused to accept. The call was still active. Through the line, my partner in New York remained quiet, waiting. Derek's voice finally returned, but the confidence was gone. He asked if this was some kind of joke. I told him calmly that it was not. His eyes flicked toward the dining room where the rest of the family continued laughing, unaware of what was unfolding just a few steps away. He lowered his voice and asked how I was connected to the firm. A fair question. The company listed in his investment proposal was not publicly linked to my name. On paper, it belonged to a private holding structure based in Delaware. Layers designed for privacy. Layers Derek never bothered to investigate. I explained that the investment committee had asked me to personally review his file. Another pause followed. Longer this time. He knew what that meant. Because if I was reviewing the file, then I had already seen everything. The inflated property values. The duplicated collateral documents. The projections that did not match the county records. His hand tightened around the phone. He whispered that this conversation should not be happening here. I agreed. But I also reminded him that he was the one who scheduled the call tonight. Not me. Behind him, Aunt Linda's voice drifted from the dining room, asking if anyone wanted more pie. The contrast was almost surreal. Family celebration on one side of the wall. Financial disaster on the other. Derek finally asked the question that mattered. What happens now? I told him the firm had two options. The first was immediate rejection of the loan application with a full report documenting every discrepancy. Reports like that rarely stay private. The second option was a formal review meeting where he could explain the numbers in person. Explain them to me. His shoulders dropped slightly. He understood the situation now. Because the person he had been mocking all evening was the only person standing between him and complete financial ruin. From the dining room, Derek's name was called again. Everyone was waiting for him to return, but he remained frozen in the hallway. And for the first time that night, he looked genuinely afraid. Derek ended the call slowly. His hand lowered from his ear, but the phone stayed frozen in his grip like it suddenly weighed too much. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The noise from the dining room drifted down the hallway. Forks scraping plates. Glasses clinking. Uncle Ray laughing loudly at something that probably was not even funny. Normal life continuing only a few feet away. Derek leaned closer and asked why I was doing this. Not angry. Confused. That question almost surprised me. I reminded him that I had not approached him with a fraudulent proposal. I had not exaggerated assets that did not exist. I had not attempted to secure millions of dollars using paperwork that would collapse under basic scrutiny. He did all of that himself. His breathing grew heavier. He said those numbers were just projections. That everyone in real estate stretched projections a little. That investors expected optimism. Optimism. An interesting word for documents that did not match public records. I told him optimism was not the problem. Fabrication was. The word landed harder than anything else. For the first time since I arrived that evening, Derek stopped trying to look confident. He looked toward the dining room again, where his audience still believed he was the most successful person in the family. His empire existed in their minds. But I had the numbers. I asked him a simple question. Did anyone else know about the real values of those properties? He shook his head quickly. Too quickly. Which meant no. Uncle Ray, Aunt Linda, Melissa, all of them were celebrating an illusion. Derek lowered his voice even more and asked what I wanted. There it was. The moment every negotiation eventually reaches. I told him something he did not expect. This was not about money. The investment committee had already decided not to fund the deal. That part was finished. But the documentation in his application was serious enough that it would normally trigger a compliance report. Reports like that travel far. Banks see them. Future investors see them. Licensing boards see them. Careers end quietly after reports like that. Derek swallowed hard. Because he finally understood the truth. His entire future in real estate was now sitting in the hallway wearing the jacket everyone had laughed at earlier. From the dining room, Melissa called out that dessert was getting cold. Derek looked at me again, this time without arrogance, without jokes, just one question left in his voice. What do I have to do? Derek's question hung in the hallway like a weight neither of us could ignore. What do I have to do? For the first time that night, his voice carried no confidence, no sarcasm, just quiet urgency. I looked past him toward the dining room. Everyone was still gathered around the oak table, finishing dessert and talking about future plans that sounded very certain. They still believed Derek's story. The successful cousin, the rising investor, the man with unstoppable momentum. I told him something simple. The firm would not release a compliance report if the application was formally withdrawn before final processing. His shoulders lifted slightly. But that was only the first step. The second step was honesty. Real numbers. Real assets. No exaggerated projections. If he ever applied again, the file would be clean. Transparent. Derek stared at the floor for a long moment. Pride is expensive when the truth arrives. Finally he nodded. Slowly. Not enthusiastically. Not happily. But realistically. He understood that the alternative would destroy far more than a holiday dinner. The decision was made. He walked back toward the dining room with me a few steps behind. Conversations paused when he entered. Aunt Linda looked up and asked how the important call went. Derek stopped beside the table. For the first time that evening, he looked unsure how to present himself. Then he said something no one expected. He admitted the investment deal was not happening. Said the numbers were not as strong as he had hoped. Said he would need to rebuild things properly before expanding again. The room grew quiet. Uncle Ray frowned slightly. Melissa looked confused. Aunt Linda tried to smile politely. No one laughed this time. Derek then looked directly at me. And something shifted. He thanked me for helping him catch the problem before it became worse. A strange sentence for everyone else. But we both knew what it meant. The attention in the room slowly turned toward me. The cousin in the worn jacket. The quiet one at the kid table. The one they had spent the evening mocking. I picked up my glass calmly. Because by the time dessert ended, everyone in that house understood something very clearly. The person they thought had nothing was the only one who had the power to end everything. If this story hit you in the chest, then like this story and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more interesting betrayal stories. See you in the next one.